little old lady from Pasadena, made famous in song, has left a lasting but inaccurate impression of the city. In fact, women of all ages and backgrounds have made significant contributions to Pasadena throughout its history. Whether their interests focused on the arts, business, or education, sports, philanthropy, or politics, their efforts have had a lasting effect.
As librarian, she purchased Spanish manuscripts, rare letters, and books on California history, amassing a major collection for the city. A gifted pianist, she organized the Coleman Chamber Music Association, lending her home as a concert venue. Now in their 90th year, the Coleman Chamber concerts are the oldest in the nation.
Through her collections and art dealerships, she introduced generations of Pasadenans to the arts of Asia. The Pasadena Art Institute she helped establish is now the Pacific Asia Museum. The Scattergood Association originated in her home, where she dedicated her energies to guiding neighborhood youth, among them the great Mac and Jackie Robinson.
Hello, welcome to the Presence of the Past. I'm Jane Ellison with Pasadena Heritage.
And I'm Ronald Lewis, a member of the Cultural Heritage Commission. We begin this segment of our program, A Woman's Place, here at the YWCA, a gathering place for Pasadena women for over 70 years.
The building was designed by world-renowned architect Julia Morgan. It was in place when the city adopted its Civic Center plan in the early 1920s.
It's the perfect spot for us to begin our discussion about influential women in Pasadena's history.
We've just introduced you to 4 Pasadena women whose individual efforts continue to enrich community life. They were librarian Nellie Russ, musician Alice Coleman Batchelder, art dealer Grace Nicholson, and community activist May Reese Johnson. During the next 25 minutes, we'll give you portraits of several other Pasadenans.
Their stories were selected for their diverse interests and background, and they offer a view on how a woman's place influenced Pasadena's cultural heritage.
Stay tuned, and after this short break, you'll meet rare book collector and dealer Alice Parsons Millard, restaurateur Jesusita Mijares, and author Charlotte Perkins Gilman.
You're going to be better than me, Christopher. I can see it in your eyes. No wasting your life on something you hate. Not for my son. You're going to college. I can see it in your eyes.
I can see it in your eyes. You are going to do something important.
Christopher, time for work.
We've always had the dreams. Now we have the means. Please, support the United Negro College Fund.
La Miniatura, as this magnificent house is known, was inspired by Alice Millard and stands as a tribute to her life's work. Mrs. Millard, as a young woman, was very interested in the work of William Morris, poet, craftsman, and social reformer. It was through this interest that she met her husband, George Millard, noted American book collector.
The couple's rare book business flourished in Southern California until Mr. Millard's death in 1918. Taking over the business, Alice Millard entered a field virtually unknown to women. She launched an enviable career, building some of America's greatest book collections. The Millards' first home in Highland Park, Illinois, had been designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. In 1923, Mrs. Millard engaged the architect again. Together, they found a site with a small ravine running through it. It was an ideal location for a house that would be free of conventions, while supplying the harmonious setting for her rare book and art collection. It was quickly recognized as a masterpiece. Mr. Wright once wrote of it,
La Miniatura stands in Pasadena against blue sky, between loving eucalyptus companions. Alice Millard lives in it. She says she would have no other house she has ever seen. As for me, I would rather have built this little house than St. Peter's in Rome.
Carolyn Garner is a research librarian in Pasadena whose responsibilities include the history collection. Housed in the Centennial Room of the Central Library on Walnut Street, this collection provides much of the information gathered for this program and others.
Carolyn, I'm so glad that you could join us today. We feel like you're a part of the show because we count on your help at the library so often with the history collection. And I know you're particularly interested in women in Pasadena's history. This house was of special interest to me and always has been just by its beauty, but when I got to looking at Alice Millard a little more closely, she seemed to me to be a really fascinating character because she was able to carry on her husband's business very successfully, and then after his death to take on Frank Lloyd Wright to build this beautiful house. But was she unusual, or was that pretty common among women?
I think actually Pasadena seemed to be a magnetic kind of point with wonderful things happening among women, by women, for women. She's one of many. You think about from the very early days, Jean Carr, who had quite an intellectual center at Carmelita, to Eleanor Miller, who's few people know about, who was actually considered the dean of the California Assembly for 20 years and the mother of the Pasadena Freeway.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So there have just been an enormous number of very interesting women here over the years.
Earlier in the program, we were showing a photograph of the two mayors, Mayor Joe Heckman and Loretta Glickman, but I hadn't known that there was another woman that was very prominent in state legislature.
Yes.
That's
yes.
great. Well, you know, we also mentioned Alice Coleman, who started the chamber orchestra, and she used to have salons in her home, and I know that Mrs. Millard had a small museum added to this building in 1932 so that she could entertain people and share her collection.
Yes, and she would have students in to enjoy the museum and the rare book collection.
That's great. And there was another person that we mentioned early on, which was Nellie Russ, and the other day I noticed the history collection has some of those original books that she collected.
She was a woman of tremendous foresight in terms of Pasadena. She felt it was very important to collect rare California material that was rare at the turn of the century in Pasadena to have for future generations. So in fact we have an outstanding collection that includes some Spanish manuscripts, letters among some early Californians, a copy of the first paper published in California. So we have a number of outstanding early Californiana materials in the collection thanks to her foresight and planning and collecting.
Right. Well, I think that some of Alice Millard's collection now is housed at the Huntington Library. I know a lot of the catalogs and the shows that she and her husband mounted during the time that they had their business are located at that library for research purposes too. I don't know whether you know it or not, but the members of the family who purchased La Miniatura after Alice's death in 1938 still live here and are caring for it and in fact renovating it. So the stewardship continues and we'll have it to enjoy for a long time.
We're very lucky here in Pasadena.
Carolyn, thanks again for joining us today, and thanks so much for all the help you give us on the presence of the past.
You're most welcome. Pasadena has a wonderful heritage we need to share.
Thanks again. After this quick message, we'll return with Ron Lewis at Mijares Restaurant, where he'll interview Arlene DeLange, the granddaughter of Jesusita Mijares.
That's my dad. And that's Mom. Dad's got an idea. A way to get rid of all the grody garbage that's polluting the world. He's invented a big rocket ship to shoot all the garbage into outer space. Mom's not sure, but Dad says his invention will save the world.
There's an easier way to save the world. Recycle. For your free recycling action guide, write Recycle. Environmental Defense Fund, 257 Park Avenue South, New York, New York.
We're here in the patio of Mijares Restaurant in Pasadena and in front of the Mijares family home. Our guest is Arlene Resendez DeLange, who just shared with me that when she came from the hospital, this is where she first appeared, right next to the restaurant. Thank you, Arlene, for being with us today.
Thank you.
You are now the third generation to work in the business, having taken over from your mother and your grandmother. Tell us a little bit about how you feel about that legacy, especially that of your grandmother, Jesusita Mijares.
I feel very proud to be a part of the Mijares family. My mother is still very active in the business, and I had the pleasure of working with my grandmother when I was very young. We have always been a very close family, and I just remember a lot of the things that Grandma taught us, such as to try to always stick together with your family, to help one another, to have your spiritual life, but also to be very generous and good to your employees, and to continue cooking the way she cooked with her molino, her mill. So we've tried to keep her recipes and try to keep the menu pretty much the way it was when she first started.
Well, the restaurant certainly is as popular as ever, and one of the few family-owned businesses in Pasadena. Do you think that's some of your grandmother's spirit too, that you've kept it a family business?
Absolutely. I think that my grandmother created a very good reputation amongst her clients and customers and the community. She was always known as being generous and active in the community and nice to people. I think that's very important, especially she was especially good to the people that worked for her, and we still have quite a few of them around. So I think that's something that's very important today, and I think that's why our family business has been around for the 73 years that we've been around now. 73 years. Now you have a son yourself. Yes, I do.
Do we see a fourth generation coming into the restaurant business?
Oh, I don't know, possibly. He's very interested in Mexican music, so he could be around maybe to be a musician, or who knows if that's what he wants to do.
Another interesting part of this, of course, is that the restaurant is on the same location all these years. You grew up in this neighborhood. How important is that to you on a day-to-day basis, now that you've moved away, but to return home? How do you feel about this neighborhood, Palmetto Street especially?
Well, of course, the street has changed quite a bit. The freeway wasn't here. Vaughn's wasn't here. We were right next to the railroad tracks. It was very much a neighborhood, lots of houses. We didn't have the office buildings around. So things have changed. A few of the old families are still living around here, but the memories we'll always have. Where we're sitting right now, I was playing on, this was grass, of course, before, and I used to play out here, and so it will always, as long as we have this house and this patio, we'll always have the memories.
What is your fondest memory of growing up on this site?
The happiest childhood memories were coming to work with my father on Saturday mornings and watching the tortilla machine and grabbing a tortilla as it would fall off the machine and throwing on a slab of butter and rolling it up and eating it. I think the eating my grandmother's cooking right out of her kitchen, I think those are things that I'll always remember.
Does the family still gather here at the restaurant for special occasions?
Probably the last time we were all here, it was a sad occasion. It was 5 years ago when my grandmother died. And we closed the restaurant and we had all of our family together. But at that point, we promised that we were going to try to, every 5 years, have a family reunion.
Standing at your grandmother's knee in the restaurant, how much of the family history did she share with you, and how do you plan to pass it on to your son?
I think it's very important to talk about your family history. My grandmother, of course, always shared stories about how she came to Pasadena from Mexico, fleeing the revolution, and she had a sister who lived in Pasadena and said that Pasadena was a beautiful city. So she came to Pasadena and started her tortilla and tamale business.
And did she talk about the founding of this restaurant?
Yes. In 1946, she decided to buy this property here, which was for sale. It was bought in order so that the family could come and live here. There were 3 small homes and a very large building where Grandma would no longer have to work as hard. The tortilla, there was more space, and they would be able to get more people in to help her. It would be sort of a semi-retirement situation. However, it ended up turning into a restaurant and being a lot more work.
Thank you again for being with us and welcoming us to su casa. We really appreciate it. And now, won't you stay tuned for another segment of the program where we talk about a woman who was called the Gloria Steinem of the 1880s.
To call Charlotte Perkins Gilman simply an author doesn't do her memory justice, for she was internationally recognized in her own time as a preeminent social commentator. She became ranked with the leaders of the women's movement in the United States. Her first major work, Women in Economics, established her reputation. Her most widely read work today, though, is the short story, The Yellow Wallpaper, which was written in Pasadena. It's a fictionalized account of an emotional breakdown brought on by a specialist's recommendation that she return home to live a domestic life and to never touch pen, brush, or pencil again. This, he maintained, would cure her of the melancholy she suffered early in her marriage to artist Walter Stetson. She fled the East Coast with her daughter Catherine to take up residence on the banks of the Arroyo Seco in 1888. It was during this sojourn that the short story was written, along with 33 articles and 23 poems. Pasadena became an important refuge for Miss Gilman. She would write of the city.
With Pasadena begins my professional living. Before that, there was no assurance of serious work. To California, in its natural features, I owe much. Its calm sublimity of contour, richness of color, profusion of flowers, fruit, and foliage, and the steady peace of its climate were meat and drink to me.
Although she was an author, Charlotte Perkins Gilman made her living as a lecturer and was in demand in both the United States and abroad. This in spite of the fact that the public was not always ready for her unconventional personal life. She divorced Walter Stetson in 1890, and for the next 10 years she traveled and lectured, wrote and published a monthly magazine while residing in New York. Her second marriage to attorney George Houghton Gilman proved a success as he adjusted his schedule to meet hers. They are seen here during a visit to Pasadena in 1927 with Mrs. Gilman's grandchildren, Walter and Dorothy. Following George's death, Charlotte returned to Pasadena. Having discovered that she was suffering with breast cancer, she wanted to be close to her grandchildren and daughter Catherine. As her health failed, she was joined by friends and family in this little house on Catalina Avenue. It was here in 1935 that she took her life.
I had not the least objection to dying, but did not propose to die of this. So I promptly bought sufficient chloroform as a substitute. When all usefulness is over, when one is assured of unavoidable and imminent death, it is the simplest of human rights to choose a quick and easy death in place of a slow, horrible one. My life is in humanity, and that goes on.
In 1980, the Cultural Heritage Commission declared the house on South Catalina Avenue a landmark. Since that time, however, development pressure has made demolition of the house highly likely. However, recently the city, the owner, and Pasadena Heritage struck an agreement which allowed for the house to be relocated and rehabilitated as an affordable housing unit. We're here this morning at the corner of Cypress and Villa in the Lincoln Triangle, where the house was just relocated last evening. We have with us this morning two people very important in the relocation process, two women, in fact, very important in this process. We have Phyllis Mueller, the housing administrator for the city, and Elizabeth Neves, the associate director of the Preservation Fund for Pasadena Heritage. Thank you both for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, it happened last night. How do you feel this morning?
Goodness, relieved. It went rather well. It was quite a dramatic move, you know, happening at midnight.
No hitches?
I don't think so.
Well,
and there was a celebration at 11:30 where many people from the Cultural Heritage Commission and Pasadena Heritage and the city celebrated the move.
Well, that's wonderful. One of the first things that comes to mind is, as an affordable housing unit, this has cost certain amounts of money. How did you put the package or the funding together to do this project?
The Pasadena Community Development Commission acquired this lot with monies from its housing trust funds. Mm-hmm. The owners of the house, the Smiths, donated the house to the city. It was a gift. There was no money involved. The Smiths also paid for most of the move of the house because they would have had to pay to have it demolished anyway. So it was kind of an even deal for them.
And Pasadena Heritage is having to do quite a bit of fundraising to pay for the rehabilitation. $20,000 of the Guards Court Fund will be used, but in addition to that we've had to apply for grants, and also we have asked some of the contractors in our craftsman referral file if they would donate services in kind, and we've had a number of those.
Well, now, as the Associate Director of the Preservation Revolving Fund, let me make sure I have that. Preservation Fund. There, you do have a pool of money to be used for such programs?
We do, yes. We have a small pool, but it's not sufficient to cover the cost of this house, and you know, we're hoping that we will be able to come out without dipping into our fund and depleting that fund.
Now, you mentioned Guards Court, which was a previous project for Pasadena Heritage. Do you see this as a way of preservation for your organization to continue going?
Absolutely. It's a very important part of it. This is a hands-on project, and you know, it's important in that respect.
Phyllis, how important is the private-public partnership to this project?
That's the times we're in. We're in the 90s now, and this private-public partnership is what is necessary to make affordable housing projects go. So you have Pasadena Heritage, you have various departments within the city, planning, building, neighborhood services, as well as housing and development. You have a private contractor who is going to rehab the house, and you have a private contractor who moved the house. So you had many entities involved in this project.
All working together.
Right.
Now, we just didn't move a house, we moved a landmark.
That's right.
What do you think about the legacy that you moved, Elizabeth?
Phew, this is a very important legacy. This was the home of Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who was a leading feminist, and it's preserving a landmark that was important with the connection to Charlotte Perkins Gilman.
And we know that women have been important in housing, and I think of Eleanor Roosevelt, who's very important in housing. How do you feel about, how do you think Mrs. Gilman would feel about the reuse of her house in this way?
She'd probably be very surprised, because I don't know how often they moved houses back in the 30s or whenever. But I think it's important because you have an architectural and a historical landmark involved in this move. And I also want to say that it's being moved, as you mentioned earlier, into the Lincoln Triangle. And this was an area that at one time was slated to become an auto dealership, but the neighborhood would have nothing to do with it. And the city has wanted to revitalize this neighborhood in the last few years. And the City Council last August designated this Lincoln Triangle as the targeted program for the neighborhood revitalization program. And so this is part of a larger program.
Yeah. It's very appropriate that this particular house comes to this neighborhood, because the turn of the century style is very similar to many houses on Cypress.
It does fit in very well, and that's very good about it. How much of the original house will remain?
All of the original house will remain. Most of the ground floor spaces will remain much the same as they are. Upstairs there's an undeveloped attic space, and we're going to be converting that into a master bedroom and a half a bathroom. In addition to that, we will be adding a small one-car garage to the site.
So when it's finished, it'll be how many bedrooms?
3 bedrooms.
3 bedrooms.
Yes.
Now, Phyllis, this will be affordable housing.
That's
to
right.
whom will it be available?
The city will make it available to a lower income family, and preference will be given for sale to a resident who's a renter here in the Lincoln Triangle.
So this is for sale. It is at the corner of Cypress and Villa.
That's right.
So people can stop by and see it. I want to thank both of you for getting up early this morning, and especially you, Elizabeth, and well, both of you after being up late at night starting the move. Thank you again for being with us.
We hope you've enjoyed this view of Pasadena's history and a few of the extraordinary women who have been a part of it.
If you have any suggestions for other topics we might cover, please write or call us at KPAS, Channel 55, Press of the Past.
About 12:01,
the house movers revved up the generators and turned on the lights at the back of the house, and we just moved. It just moved. The maneuvering to get it onto the street took probably about an hour, and then they actually turned the house on Del Mar, because the front of the house had to be turned right round so that it was at the back of the trailer. And then once we got onto to the main wide streets, it probably took about an hour to get here. So, and the house sort of seemed to weave in and out of the traffic lights as it moved along Colorado, and that was quite impressive.